The lights were harsh, white-hot, cutting through the chamber like blades. Cameras panned in, lenses thirsting for drama, and every pair of eyes in the room fixed on the two women facing off at center stage. Kellyanne Conway leaned forward, lips curled into the smirk she'd worn like armor for years, her voice sharpened into that condescending tone America knew all too well. "Congresswoman Crockett," she said, drawing out the syllables as if speaking to a child, "you can stand here and pontificate, but the numbers don't lie. Your record is thin, your arguments are weaker, and frankly, if you want to debate facts with me, you'll lose before you even start." The words landed like a slap across the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd, not because it was new, but because it was brazen. Conway had always prided herself on weaponizing facts, cherry-picked, twisted, dressed up in certainty. And tonight, she came armed to humiliate. Her voice was smooth, practiced, dripping with the smugness of someone convinced no one could possibly outmaneuver her. To Kellyanne, this was her arena. And for a moment, silence swallowed everything. The audience didn't clap, didn't jeer, they held their breath. It felt as though time itself had stalled. You could almost hear hearts pounding as Conway leaned back in her chair, folding her arms, satisfied. In her mind, she had already won. What Kellyanne said in that moment didn't just bruise, it cut deep. It was the kind of attack designed not merely to debate, but to demean, to plant the seed of doubt. She wanted to corner Jasmine Crockett, to shrink her down before the cameras and the millions who would watch later. And yet, beneath the weight of that smug declaration, Jasmine didn't flinch. Her eyes locked on Conway's with a stillness that wasn't weakness, but preparation. The kind of calm that meant something bigger was coming. The room trembled with an anticipation no one could name yet, but everyone could feel. Because when arrogance meets resolve, silence becomes thunder waiting to strike, and strike it would. Because what Jasmine said next didn't just flip the script. It flipped the stage itself. For years, Kellyanne Conway had carried a reputation like a sharpened blade. She wasn't just a political operative. She was the architect of spin itself, the woman who turned contradictions into strategy and lies, into slogans. When she first coined the phrase alternative facts, the world laughed. But then they realized it wasn't a joke. It was a blueprint that allowed her to bend reality, to dismiss outrage, to make the indefensible sound polished. In circles of power, she was admired for her cunning. Among ordinary Americans, she was both infamous and inescapable. Wherever truth tried to stand, Kellyanne seemed to find a way to move the ground beneath it. That history was the baggage she brought into the room the night she set her sights on Jasmine Crockett. She wasn't just challenging a freshman congresswoman. She was stepping onto familiar ground, confident she could dismantle anyone with a smile and a quip. She believed her reputation alone could overwhelm, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't built to be overwhelmed. Bold, sharp, unapologetic, she had walked through fire long before ever sharing a stage with Conway. A black woman in Congress, a lawyer, who had battled systemic injustice in courtrooms. She had faced intimidation before, and survived it. More than survived, she had thrived. Each time someone tried to box her in, she found a way to turn the walls into a platform. And tonight, with cameras rolling and a national audience tuned in, she knew the stakes were higher than ego or point scoring. This wasn't just about two women trading barbs. It was about the soul of American truth itself. On one side stood a figure who had mastered the art of distortion, using language as smoke and mirrors. On the other stood a congresswoman whose very presence challenged the machinery of deceit. Someone who embodied the idea that authenticity and resilience could still pierce through the noise. It wasn't red versus blue. It wasn't left versus right. It was something deeper. Arrogance versus dignity, spin versus substance, delusion versus reality. and the audience could feel it. Social feeds began to buzz even before the exchange was finished. Screenshots of Conway's smirk spread with captions like, "Here we go again." Threads sparked debates about whether Jasmine would crumble, whether she could withstand the pressure that had undone so many others. Yet beneath the surface, something electric was brewing. Viewers sensed it. The way Crockett's stillness wasn't surrender, but a coiled spring. The trap Conway was setting was obvious. Flood the moment with selective data. Drown Crockett in rapid-fire facts and leave her scrambling. It was the tactic Conway had perfected: control the narrative, overwhelm with confidence, and leave the opponent looking weak. The formula had rarely failed, but what Kellyanne didn't realize was that Jasmine Crockett had seen it before, studied it, prepared for it. Every dismissive smirk, every rhetorical trick, every gotcha line was nothing new. She knew exactly what Conway would bring to the table. And while the audience braced for Crockett to stumble, she was silently sharpening her response into something unforgettable. Because the truth was, Jasmine hadn't just walked into Kellyanne Conway's trap. She had been waiting for it. The moment felt like a trap, until Jasmine revealed she had been waiting for this exact setup. Kellyanne Conway was never an accident. She was a creation, a product of decades spent in the machinery of politics where perception mattered more than substance and words could be sharpened into weapons. Long before she became a household name, she had carved out a career as a pollster and strategist, honing the art of language manipulation. She studied audiences the way a magician studies a crowd, not to understand them, but to control their gaze, to keep their attention fixed on one hand while the other pulled the trick. Her rise reached its peak when she became one of the most visible faces of Trump world. She wasn't just a spokesperson, she was its translator, converting chaos into coherence, spinning scandal into talking points, transforming reality into theater. When journalists pressed her on falsehoods, she didn't retreat. She invented a phrase that would echo across the political lexicon: alternative facts. In those two words, she revealed her philosophy: that truth was not absolute, but malleable, something to be bent, shaped, or discarded depending on the needs of the moment. That phrase alone could have ended a lesser figure's career. But for Kellyanne, it was fuel. She wore ridicule like armor. The more the press mocked her, the stronger her reputation grew within the circles that thrived on distortion. To her supporters, she wasn't a liar. She was a warrior, someone willing to take on the establishment with a smirk and a soundbite. To her critics, she was a walking embodiment of cynicism, proof that in modern politics, shamelessness could be a strategy. Her tactics were always the same: speak with unwavering confidence, regardless of accuracy. Flood the conversation with statistics, anecdotes, or half-truths so quickly that no one could keep pace. Smile in the face of contradiction. And above all, never yield an inch. For Kellyanne Conway, debate wasn't about discovering truth. It was about suffocating it. And over time, she became frighteningly effective. Television loved her. Networks invited her onto panels because she guaranteed drama. Hosts braced themselves knowing she would deflect questions with ease, pivoting from scandal to slogan without breaking eye contact. She didn't need to win arguments in the traditional sense. All she had to do was leave the audience confused, uncertain, exhausted, and in that fog, she claimed victory. This was the reputation Jasmine Crockett confronted, not just a political figure, but a master illusionist, someone who could walk into any room armed with contradictions and leave her opponents flustered. Conway's confidence was her weapon. She projected dominance so thoroughly that even seasoned debaters found themselves caught off guard. And on this stage, before this audience, Kellyanne believed her formula would once again prove unstoppable. She leaned on her greatest strength: arrogance disguised as expertise. She had played this role countless times, reducing her opponents to defensive scrambling, leaving them grasping for footing while she walked away untouched. For years, Kellyanne Conway could bend the truth and walk away unscathed. But tonight was different, because tonight across from her sat someone who didn't play by those rules. Jasmine Crockett wasn't intimidated by the flood of facts or the smug delivery. She recognized the patterns. She had seen the tricks. And unlike so many before her, she didn't plan to survive Conway's assault. She planned to turn it back on her. Kellyanne didn't know it yet, but she had finally met her match. The audience thought they were about to witness another episode of Conway's dominance, another display of her spin triumphing over sincerity. Instead, they were about to see the moment where confidence cracked, where arrogance became weakness, where spin collapsed under the weight of truth. Because Jasmine Crockett doesn't just debate, she dismantles. Jasmine Crockett's story did not begin under the bright lights of Congress, nor in the roar of viral clips. It began in courtrooms that smelled of paper and sweat, where justice often felt like a coin toss weighted against the poor, the marginalized, and the unheard. She had stepped into those rooms not as someone born to power, but as a woman determined to wrestle power away from those who hoarded it. As a lawyer, she built her reputation case by case, client by client, fighting for people who were too often dismissed as disposable. She defended tenants against predatory landlords. She took on police misconduct when others told her to stay quiet. She faced judges who looked down on her, colleagues who underestimated her, and opponents who tried to intimidate her. None of it stopped her. If anything, the obstacles carved her into something stronger. Every dismissal, every sneer, every attempt to silence her became fuel. Where others saw closed doors, Jasmine saw doors that could be kicked open. Her style was fearless, but it was not recklessness. It was clarity. In the courtroom, she didn't just argue, she exposed. She stripped away pretenses and excuses until all that remained was the raw truth. Undeniable, inescapable. Clients who felt invisible finally saw someone stand in their corner without apology. And the establishment that expected her to fold quickly realized they had underestimated a force that was not going away. That same fire carried her into politics. When Jasmine Crockett decided to run for office, she wasn't chasing prestige. She was carrying her cases onto a bigger stage. Her campaign was blunt, unapologetic, rooted in the people she had defended. She did not come from privilege. She came from the struggle, and she brought that with her to every door she knocked on, every speech she gave. Voters recognized it immediately. She wasn't polished in the artificial way politicians are trained to be. She was real, sharp when needed, warm when it mattered, and unwilling to bow to anyone who confused status with righteousness. In Congress, her style turned into spectacle, but not because she sought theatrics. It was because her bluntness pierced through the scripted monotony of hearings. She wasn't afraid to clash with colleagues who tried to drown her out. She wasn't afraid to call out hypocrisy to someone's face, even when the cameras were rolling. Where others softened their words for fear of backlash, Jasmine sharpened hers, knowing that representation meant more than occupying a seat. It meant showing every young woman of color watching that their voice, too, could be unshakable. And she knew the cost of speaking truth. She paid it gladly. The insults hurled at her, the stereotypes weaponized against her, the attempts to smear her character, she endured them all. But rather than diminish her, the attacks only magnified her determination. Every moment of disrespect reinforced why she was there in the first place, because too many people in power counted on silence. Jasmine Crockett refused to give them that comfort. Her identity was not a burden she carried into politics. It was her strength. As a black woman in spaces where power had long been hoarded by men, she turned every doubting glance into an opportunity to prove that resilience is louder than prejudice. She wore her roots, her history, her very presence as an act of defiance. Every word she spoke in those marble halls carried the weight of generations who had been told to wait their turn. She wasn't waiting anymore. This made her more than a politician. To many, she became a symbol of authenticity in a world addicted to spin, of courage in a world where fear dictated silence. She didn't just speak for herself. She embodied a collective refusal to be erased. And that authenticity terrified those who thrived on manipulation. Because while spin can confuse, authenticity clarifies. While deception can dominate for a moment, truth endures. And it was that endurance that brought her to this confrontation with Kellyanne Conway. On paper, they couldn't have been more different. One, a veteran of manipulation, the other, a newcomer armed with conviction. But in reality, this moment was inevitable. Conway had long prided herself on being untouchable, on twisting every exchange into her advantage. But what happens when the queen of spin faces someone who cannot be spun? Every courtroom battle Jasmine fought, every dismissal she endured, every insult hurled her way, they were all rehearsals for this stage. The bright lights, the rolling cameras, the smugness of a practiced manipulator sitting across from her. It was all too familiar. She knew exactly how to handle it because she had handled it her entire life. And so, as the nation watched, what looked like an uneven match was, in truth, the moment Jasmine Crockett had been preparing for. Every case she fought prepared her for this one moment when she would face the spin doctor queen herself. Kellyanne Conway leaned in with the force of a seasoned interrogator. Her words fired like darts meant to pin Jasmine Crockett to the wall. "Let's get real here," she began, voice dripping with disdain. "Unemployment under Trump was at record lows. Border crossings, down, inflation, practically non-existent. Meanwhile, under your party's watch, working families are drowning. These are facts, Congresswoman. Cold, hard, undeniable facts. What exactly do you have to show for your time in office besides loud rhetoric and finger-pointing?" The cadence was relentless. Before Jasmine could inhale, Kellyanne launched another volley, talking over her, slicing her sentences in half. "You defend chaos in hearings. You grandstand instead of legislate. Do you even read the bills you claim to support? Numbers don't lie, Jasmine. Your record is paper thin. The facts aren't on your side. They never have been." The crowd stirred, some nodding, others shaking their heads, but all of them leaning in. Conway's voice carried the confidence of a prizefighter who believed the opponent was already on the ropes. Every smirk, every dramatic pause between her facts was meant to press Crockett down, to force her into retreat. But Jasmine didn't retreat. She sat still, eyes narrowed, lips pressed but unshaken. Her face, calm yet taut, gave away nothing but patience. She didn't flail against Conway's interruptions. She didn't rush to interject. She let the storm rage, watching with a precision that unnerved even those who were rooting for Conway. The silence on Jasmine's end became its own spectacle. Members of the audience whispered among themselves. Some murmured, "Why isn't she saying anything?" While others whispered, "Wait for it." The cameras captured every micro-expression. Conway leaning forward, sharp and aggressive, Jasmine sitting taller, every muscle coiled but controlled. It seemed, at first, like Conway was dominating. She cut off Jasmine's attempts to speak, peppered her with statistics, and filled the air with rehearsed certainty. Each jab landed with the smug assurance of someone who had played this game 1,000 times and never truly lost. For a moment, even the commentators, whispering from the sidelines, wondered if Crockett was faltering, if she had finally met the kind of spin that couldn't be countered. But then, the cracks appeared. The first was subtle. Conway repeated, herself. In her rush to smother Jasmine with facts, she circled back to the same point about unemployment, rephrased, but essentially identical. The repetition wasn't strategy. It was nervous momentum disguised as dominance. Those watching closely noticed the shift. The second came in Conway's smirk. What had begun as smug confidence started to look strained, her laughter too forced, her tone a little too sharp. She was overcompensating, trying to hold her ground in the silence Jasmine offered in return. And Jasmine? She wasn't silent out of weakness. She was waiting, watching, calculating. Every second Conway overextended, every extra flourish, every exaggerated statistic. Jasmine absorbed it all. Her expression sharpened, her stillness transforming from quiet to command. She looked less like a cornered politician and more like a lioness watching her prey exhaust itself. The murmurs in the room grew louder. A shift was happening. People leaned toward Jasmine, sensing the weight of what was building. A cameraman caught a young woman in the crowd whispering, "She's about to go off." The air buzzed with anticipation, like the electric pause before. Thunder cracks the sky. Conway kept pressing, unaware of the tightening noose. "You can't hide behind slogans, Jasmine. The facts are staring you in the face, and the American people are sick of excuses. Admit it. You're out of your depth." And that was when Jasmine's lips curled into the faintest smile. It was the kind of smile that made the audience straighten in their seats. A smile that didn't belong to someone overwhelmed, but to someone who knew exactly what was coming. Next, and then, Jasmine struck. Jasmine leaned forward, finally breaking her stillness, her voice calm, but carrying with a quiet authority that instantly hushed the crowd. "Kellyanne," she said, slow and deliberate, "you've built a career on drowning people with words. But let's strip this down, shall we? You keep calling what you say facts. Let's actually look at them." She paused, letting the silence sit heavy, then raised a finger. "Unemployment under Trump. You love that line, but you leave out the fact that he inherited an economy already on the upswing, built under President Obama. You cherry-pick. A number without context. That's not a fact. That's spin." Gasps rippled. Cameras zoomed in on Conway's face, her smirk flickering just slightly. Jasmine didn't press. Not yet. She let the reaction hang in the air before moving to her next point. "You brought up border crossings. You say they were down. That sounds nice, doesn't it? But you don't mention the cruelty of family separations, the cages children were locked in, the chaos of policies that violated human dignity. You call that success? You call that a fact? I call that a national shame." The audience broke into murmurs, some clapping, others stunned. Kellyanne shifted in her chair, attempting to cut in, but Jasmine raised her voice just enough to command the floor. "And inflation," she continued, steady as a heartbeat, "you pretend it was non-existent under Trump. You forget the record-breaking deficit he left, the crumbling infrastructure, the mismanagement that tanked small businesses long before the pandemic. You choose snapshots that fit your story and ignore the wreckage left behind. That's not truth. That's marketing. That's what you've always sold. Alternative facts packaged as reality." The words hit like a hammer. The phrase alternative facts echoed in the room, dragging Conway back to the very label that had once made her infamous. Her smirk faltered. Again, this time visibly. Jasmine leaned back slightly, allowing herself a measured smile. "You see, the problem with relying on spin, Kellyanne, is that eventually you meet someone who's not afraid to call it out. You cornered a lot of people over the years, but you're not cornering me." Applause burst out, sharp and rising. Conway tried to interject, her voice tight. "That's not—" But Jasmine cut her off, not with volume, but precision. "You accuse me of grandstanding in hearings? Let's be clear. When I raise my voice in Congress, it's not because I love the sound of it. It's because I'm facing down people who'd rather silence the truth than hear it. And if you think I'm going to apologize for defending civil rights, for standing up against corruption, for calling out hypocrisy, then you're sorely mistaken." Cheers erupted now, louder than before. Some in the crowd stood, clapping. Others shook their heads in disbelief at the audacity of the moment. And you know what? Jasmine pressed on, each word measured, deliberate. You said my record is thin. Let's talk about records. My record is fighting for people who don't have a voice. My record is standing up when it's inconvenient, when it's costly, when it's dangerous. Your record, Kellyanne? Selling contradictions, making cruelty sound respectable, dressing up lies as though they were gifts. That's not public service. That's performance. And America deserves better than performers who confuse deception with leadership. The air in the room shifted. What had begun as Conway's show was now undeniably Jasmine's. Conway's lips tightened, her once relaxed posture now rigid, her eyes darting as the crowd responded not to her words, but to Jasmine's. And beyond the stage, something else ignited. Phones lit up. Tweets exploded. Jasmine Crockett just obliterated Kellyanne Conway. Clips hit TikTok in real time. Hashtags began trending before the exchange had even ended. Memes with Conway's fading smirk captioned "Facts versus Facts" spread like wildfire. Jasmine kept her rhythm steady, unshaken by the frenzy around her. She let the audience laugh, cheer, gasp, then reeled them back in with the next blow. You can flood a conversation with numbers all you want, but numbers without honesty are just noise. You can interrupt me, talk over me, roll your eyes, but that won't change this reality. You can't bully truth. Not anymore. Not tonight. Every pause was calculated. Every punchline was a scalpel, slicing through Conway's carefully constructed armor. The more Jasmine spoke, the smaller Conway seemed. The queen of spin was shrinking before everyone's eyes, her confidence cracking under the weight of a truth she couldn't bend. By the time Jasmine finished, Kellyanne wasn't cornering anyone. She was cornered herself. The applause thundered, not just in the room, but across living rooms, phones, and laptops across America. Viewers replayed the clip, sharing it, quoting it, lifting it like a rallying cry. Jasmine Crockett had taken the weapon Conway wielded so long, the illusion of facts, and shattered it on live stage. But that was only the beginning of the shockwaves. The moment Jasmine Crockett delivered her final line, the room erupted. Applause surged like a wave, but it didn't stop at the edges of the stage. It spilled outward, amplified by every smartphone raised high, every camera trained on her, every viewer already clipping the exchange to share online. Within minutes, social media became a battlefield of reactions. But this time, the story was clear. Jasmine had struck, and the world had felt it. Hashtags began trending before Conway even left her chair. Crockett claps back. Facts vs. spin. A truth wins. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all lit up with the same electricity. Fan edits looped the moment Jasmine leaned in, eyes unshaken, voice cutting through Conway's smirk like glass through silk. Memes juxtaposed Kellyanne's smug expression at the start with her fading smile at the end, captions declaring, "From cornering to cornered." On TikTok, creators layered dramatic music over Crockett's lines, transforming her takedown into a cinematic trailer that viewers watched on repeat. Headlines poured in within the hour. Crockett destroys Conway in viral showdown. Moment of truth on live stage. Even outlets typically dismissive of Democrats were forced to acknowledge the spectacle, if only because the clip had become impossible to ignore. The sheer virality of it transcended partisan lines. Everyone, it seemed, was talking about Jasmine Crockett, and beyond the headlines, everyday Americans weighed in. Parents posted about their daughters watching the clip with wide eyes, seeing in Jasmine a model of courage under pressure. Young activists tweeted that they finally felt represented, not just by someone in Congress, but by someone who fought, back with the same fire they felt in their own bones. One viral post read, "Watching Jasmine Crockett hold her ground against Kellyanne Conway made me believe again, not in politics, but in the power of truth." The ripple effect spread further. Celebrities chimed in, musicians, actors, athletes, voices that rarely dipped into politics, praising Jasmine's composure. A Grammy-winning artist tweeted, "That was the moment. Jasmine Crockett didn't just win an argument, she showed us what leadership looks like." Late-night hosts picked up the clip, replaying it with commentary that turned Conway's stumble into a punchline. Even cable news pundits, usually entrenched in their partisan lanes, found themselves replaying the video over and over, dissecting Jasmine's rhythm, her precision, her refusal to be drowned out. The power of the moment was undeniable. Conway, long the queen of spin, had been dethroned in the most public way possible, and the world had receipts. Every replay, every reaction video, every meme added to the sense that something larger had just happened. It wasn't merely that Jasmine Crockett had won a debate. It was that she had broken through the fog of cynicism, even for a moment, and given people something rare, clarity. Even opponents had to acknowledge it. Some tried to soften the blow, claiming Conway had been ganged up on by bias. Others admitted outright that Jasmine's takedown was masterful. A conservative commentator grudgingly tweeted, "Say what you want about her politics, but Crockett owned that stage tonight." When your critics are forced to concede your strength, you know the impact is real. Meanwhile, Jasmine herself remained composed in the aftermath, offering no gloating sound bites, no victory laps. She let the moment breathe, letting others tell the story for her. And tell it they did. Millions of shares, countless hashtags, reactions pouring in from across the country and beyond. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It had become cultural currency. By morning, the clip wasn't just trending. It was unavoidable. It had pierced through the constant churn of scandals and headlines, capturing something that resonated deeper than politics. It was about dignity. It was about courage. It was about the idea that, even in an age of spin and spectacle, truth still had the power to shake the ground. And yet, beneath the viral spectacle, a deeper lesson was unfolding. When the dust settled and the clips finished ricocheting across screens, what lingered wasn't just the sharpness of Jasmine Crockett's words or the collapse of Kellyanne Conway's smirk. It was the meaning beneath it all. For every cheer in the audience, every meme online, there was a deeper truth being absorbed. Composure isn't silence, and dignity isn't weakness. In the face of arrogance and deception, Jasmine showed that the strongest weapon is not volume, not theatrics, but the unshakable clarity of truth. Her performance was more than a counter-argument. It was a revelation. She didn't have to shout Conway down. She didn't have to mirror her interruptions. She stood steady, deliberate, methodical, and in doing so, reminded millions of something many had begun to doubt. Truth can still cut through the fog. In a political landscape where spin often wins the day, Jasmine's calm dismantling of Conway became a lesson in courage. Because this wasn't just Jasmine versus Kellyanne, it was integrity versus arrogance, authenticity versus manipulation, dignity versus deceit. And in that clash, integrity won. The power of representation mattered too. For young women watching, particularly women of color, the sight of Jasmine holding her ground against one of the most notorious spin doctors of modern politics wasn't just satisfying, it was liberating. She proved that the table doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest or smirk the hardest. The table belongs to those who bring truth with them, even when the odds are stacked, even when the air feels poisoned with doubt. And for everyday Americans, weary from years of deception and distortion, her victory was a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply refuses to move. Jasmine carried herself with the dignity of someone who understood the stakes. That every word, every pause, every steady look wasn't just for herself. It was for the millions who have been told to sit down, be quiet, or accept the lies handed to them. She spoke for them, and in that moment, they saw themselves win. The moral crescendo of the night was undeniable. Arrogance can swagger, deception can dominate the headlines, spin can confuse the story. But dignity endures, integrity survives, and truth, though often battered, has a way of rising when spoken with courage. Jasmine's takedown of Conway wasn't just viral content. It was a cultural reminder that some values remain unshakable no matter how turbulent the storm. In times of chaos, remember, the truth still matters, and those who carry it can still win. That message is what gave the moment its permanence. Not the laughter at Conway's expense, not even the thrill of watching a practiced manipulator stumble, but the reassurance that dignity can triumph in the most hostile arenas. Jasmine Crockett became more than a congresswoman defending herself. She became a symbol of justice, standing unflinching before distortion. And for a country often divided, that mattered. For a people often weary, that gave hope. For a generation too often told that politics is only spin, that gave a reason to believe again. The lesson was simple but powerful. Truth, when carried with courage, is still enough to flip the stage. Kellyanne Conway may have walked onto that stage believing she could corner Jasmine Crockett with her arsenal of spin and smug facts. But by the time the exchange ended, it was Conway who was cornered, and Jasmine who stood unshaken. She didn't just survive an ambush, she flipped the entire stage, and that's what makes this moment bigger than one debate, bigger than two women locked in confrontation. It's about what wins in America, not arrogance, not deception, not spin. What wins, what always wins, is dignity, resilience, and the refusal to be silenced when the stakes are highest. Jasmine Crockett embodied all of that, and in doing so, reminded us that the American spirit is still alive in those who dare to speak truth when others would rather drown it out. But here's the thing. Her voice doesn't rise alone. Every time you share, every time you amplify, every time you choose to stand with those who speak truth to power, you become part of that same fight. That's why we're here. To not just watch history, but to spread it, to carry it forward, to make sure moments like this don't vanish into the noise. So if you believe truth still matters, subscribe, share this video, and keep building this movement with us. Because voices like Jasmine's deserve to be heard not just once, not just tonight, but every time spin threatens to overtake the stage. Because in the end, the stage doesn't belong to spin, it belongs to the truth.